This is episode number 116 of the Guns Magazine podcast. Hi there, and welcome to the Guns Magazine podcast. I'm your host and the editor of Guns Magazine, Brent Wheat. Thanks for joining us as we talk to the interesting folks who make up the world of shooting, hunting, and the firearms industry. But first, before we get started, let's have a quick chat about our sponsor, Luth-AR. Luth-AR is home of the NBA buttstocks, which are affordable, lightweight, fully adjustable buttstocks for the AR-15 fixed and collapsible rifles. But that's not all. Luth-AR is your one-stop shop for build kits, replacement parts, and custom accessories, including the chubby grip, palm handguards, oversized switch safety, and paddle bolt catch. Luth-AR is proudly made in the USA, and with 4 decades of experience, will continue their mission of innovate to dominate with high-quality products for your ARs. Find out more at luthar.com. Today, I got a chance to talk with Vince Bancroft. You might not know Vince's name, but I'm pretty sure you've at least heard about the incident that vaulted him into the limelight, the North Hollywood Shootout. Vince was an LAPD detective in 1997 when 2 heavily armed gunmen stormed a bank, confronted police, and by the time the whole thing was over, nearly 2,000 rounds had been fired. 12 police officers and 8 civilians were injured, and both gunmen were dead. This is Vince's story. Well, good morning, Vince.
Good morning, Brett.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me and our listeners of the Guns Magazine podcast. For folks that don't know who you were involved in something that is kind of a touchstone, both in the law enforcement community and I guess in popular culture in general, and that is the North Hollywood Shootout. And I was shocked before I called you. I was thinking, I did the math, and that was 25 years ago. It's amazing how time flies, and I'm sure there are moments to you it seems like it's centuries ago, and other times it seems like it happened yesterday. But you were involved in the North Hollywood Shootout. I believe you were a detective at the time, weren't you?
Yeah, I was assigned to the residential burglary section for North Hollywood detectives.
Wow. So you probably didn't think that you would get involved in what was essentially a military-style firefight. And, just off the top here, I'll give the brief overview. It was 2 guys, Eugene Phillips and Emil, and there's debate on how we pronounce Emil's last name. We'll call him Matasreno, and we'll hope that's the way it's pronounced. But basically, these 2 guys, hardcore bank robbers, they'd already killed an armed security guard in a previous robbery, and they had their robbery at a North Hollywood bank interrupted. And when the police rolled up, apparently they decided they were going to shoot out rather than try to escape, because there were opportunities in there for them to probably at least try to get away, and they didn't really try. The interesting thing is they had a whole bunch of weapons, and they were wearing body armor. And when it was all over, I believe 11 police officers had been injured, 6 or 8 civilians. Fortunately, none of them died. Total rounds fired was nearly 2,000. And that's why it is such a touchstone for law enforcement, especially because basically you guys, the cops, were shooting at these guys, and body armor and automatic weapons fire was making them darn near impervious for about 44 minutes. And that was on February 28th of 1997. So kind of walk us through, that's the high level view. And as we were talking, it would take us hours to get down in the weeds of everything that happened because so many people were involved. But kind of walk us through your day and how I'm sure it went from a normal day at work to this thing we're still talking about 25 years later.
Well, you're correct in saying that, being involved in something like that, such a mass critical incident, is kind of the last thing on your mind. It's on your mind. I mean, that's all part of officer safety and being prepared for anything that might arise. But my partner / boss and I were actually just getting into our car to go to Riverside to serve a search warrant we'd been tracking down a guy who was stealing a bunch of computers from private schools and reselling them. And that's when the call came out that a patrol unit was, I believe, southbound. Yeah, I believe due south on Laurel Canyon Boulevard, and they observed some individuals dressed in black tactical gear going inside the bank, and that there was a possible robbery in progress.
I was going to say, we call that a clue in our business.
Yeah. Excuse me. And so, of course, everybody ran out of the back door of the barn, and it was like all the horses got loose. And we immediately, our lieutenant jumped in the back seat of my car, and we started discussing which way did we think would be the best way to go in. And we decided to come in from the due east, simply because most everybody else would probably come in the other side. And plus we'd have a lot of coverage from the separation of one residential street between us and the bank. And there'd be a likelihood, we're always try to be aware of things like layoff people,
right?
Armed people covering the backs, the getaway car parked to the rear potentially, and things such as that. And so with that in mind, that's why we responded the way we did. So we were kind of off the northeast corner the southeast corner of the property. And the Bank of America property is actually fairly long. There's a good sized parking lot, then the bank, and then a smaller parking lot. And then there was a drive-through area that we didn't know at the time, but it wasn't operational anymore.
Mm.
And so we went to that southeast side, and there were some other people there. And when we first got there, we immediately heard what sounded like automatic gunfire coming from within the bank.
Yeah. And as it turned out, it was a lot of automatic gunfire. I've got a list here. They had Bushmaster XM15s, at HK91, and several AK types that they had converted to full auto. So they were seriously loaded for bear.
That's correct. And there's been different things that came out surrounding why they did what they did at that moment in time, but essentially, from what I know, and I don't know the totality of everything, due to a lot of robberies, a lot of the banks started having a third party service their ATM machines. Prior to that, there could be as much as $1 million in the vault.
Wow.
And what happened was when they got in there and saw there wasn't near that much money, because that was the first weekend this bank was going to start being serviced by this other company, that's when they lost their temper and started spraying rounds and assaulting the bank manager. Yeah,
from what I read, it was like a movie. They're screaming at people, they're firing over their heads, and that's not typically how a bank robbery goes down. A lot of times bank robberies are pretty quiet little things. They threaten the teller and try to get out of there.
Yeah, this was sort of life imitating art. A lot of people seen that movie Heat.
Right.
And something more along that line versus the lone robber who goes in, passes the note to the teller, gets the money and leaves.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was way different than that. But once the gunfire started, and this is what my biggest takeaway from all this was training.
Mm-hmm.
We always hear, always train. And because there was a lot of things in the toolbox that had been so repetitively drilled into our heads over the years, watching your background, cover, concealment, such as that you don't even really think about that at the time. But later, when you're kind of debriefing in your own brain, you would say, gosh, I wonder why I did that.
Yeah.
Oh, I know, it's because I was trained in this, and if I took a portion of this and a portion of another of that, that's what I came up with, was this solution.
Yeah.
And of course, you're doing that in milliseconds.
Well, you engage these guys. You had rounds back at you. Since we're talking about training, though, was there anything that sticks out in your head as kind of the training scar that, why did I do that? Or at the time, 25 years ago, a certain thing was common practice and you realized in real world scenarios, maybe we need to change some training and tactics?
Well, when my partner and I repositioned down Agnes Street, we went into a backyard that was adjacent to the decommissioned drive-through windows.
Mm-hmm.
And I came in behind him. We were down behind a block wall and a creosote-covered telephone pole. And he says, I think I saw a guy dressed like he's on SWAT. And I'm like, there's no way they could be here already. I mean, they're probably just getting the phone call.
Yeah.
So I said, it's got to be one of them. And so we kind of took a quick peek over the wall again, and we could see people across the intersection standing on the balconies of their apartments watching this. They were watching a TV show.
Jeez.
So we quickly discussed, hey, we got to shoot at these guys basically shoulders down.
Yeah.
Because if we miss, it'll hit a parked car. Whereas if we try to shoot higher, I can't say how many times people say, well, why did you take a headshot? And that was one of a couple of reasons. Number one was there was people right across the street.
Yeah.
And if we missed the head, then you're going to end up probably hitting somebody, some innocent bystander. And the other thing, too, was that, a lot of times it was primarily competitive pistol shooting people that I know who would say, why didn't you go for the headshot? I've seen you take, headshots on the steel targets out here. I said,
right.
Two reasons. Number one, the head wasn't moving out here. And I said, second of all, it's not shooting back at you.
Yeah.
And so you got so many things going on, but that was the background. That was a training thing that there's really no need to change it. It's just to repetitively remind themselves and the people they train, the new officers coming in, how important it is. So
during all this exchange of gunfire and thousands of rounds being fired, literally, did you ever run out of bullets?
Yeah, yes, I did. My partner did too. In fact, this was something that we talked about at length with others too. With the incident was debriefed. He was carrying a Smith & Wesson, I think a full-size 9mm,
mm-hmm.
and I had the 6906 compact.
Okay.
And back then, we didn't have us who were wearing suits. And we're now to carry tactical vests that can be quickly put on.
Right.
The Velcro sides and everything. And, then throw your LAPD windbreaker on over that
mm-hmm.
in a critical incident. So you're a little more easily identifiable than two guys with guns in my backyard, and I don't know who they are.
Yeah.
So his magazine, of course, is a different size than mine, and we were running out of ammo. So there were some other officers that had remained behind cover of the detached garage behind this residence. And so I turned around and I said, hey, we're running out of ammo. So one of the guys stepped forward and in a underhand motion threw us a magazine. And just as he threw the magazine, it was kind of like I was just normally blinking my eye, and my eye blinked. Suddenly, I realized the whole, I believe it was the right side of his head was covered with blood.
Oh, no.
And when he came out to throw that to us, he took a AK round right across the top of his head.
Wow.
So I get his magazine, and guess what? It's for Beretta.
Of course.
for a 92F.
Yeah.
So I'm down there. I asked my partner how many rounds he had left, and I did my best to split the magazine in two, and I loaded his, and I loaded mine, and so we could stay in the fight.
Well, that's something I've never seen talked about, or certainly never in a training scenario, but loading a magazine under fire. Oh my gosh. I'm thinking your fingers were a little bit trembling, perhaps.
It was weird. At the time, I was a single parent with 3 kids I was raising. And all I remember doing is I was running down Agnes to get to the backyard of this residence. I remember just saying a quick little prayer, more or less, God, let me go home to my kids tonight, because I was so worried they would go home to an empty house when they got out of school. So, but after that, there's that point in time where the adrenaline's going, you're listening to yourself talk, you're listening to your partner, you're communicating, trying to pick up what you can off the radio. There's really not a whole lot of time to more or less get nervous. I just remember emptying the magazines, separating the rounds, and it was around this time that I had my head up against the telephone pole, and I could feel the rounds hitting the telephone pole above me, and it would sort of vibrate down the pole.
Yeah. And
so, because every time Matasareno was already in the car. Every time Phillips would come out underneath where you see it says Bank of America, the lettering on the side of the corner, we'd get off 1, sometimes 2 shots. And it was like another thing. It's like the old cop's nightmare, where you can see the guys getting hit by your bullets not going down.
Yeah.
And that was, you could see movement of the clothing, and they had the body armor. But the guy's like Robo Guy,
Wow.
And so he would turn and fire at us, and we'd go back down. At one point, he stepped out, and I aimed for the receiver area on his HK-93, I believe it was the 308.
Yeah.
And there were some other officers at the north end of the parking area, and one of them did the same. And the bullets were so obliterated, we couldn't tell whose was whose, but you kind of see him, Phillips had to shake his hand like he's got something on it.
Yeah.
Well, that's when one or both of our rounds struck that, went in, broke the extractor rod. And that's when that rifle jammed. So he goes over to the trunk of the white car, throws it in there, and then he comes out with the AK, with the drum magazines, and armor-piercing rounds.
Wow.
So now suddenly the block wall that we're behind, the rounds are starting to come through.
Oh, my.
And it was weird because as they more or less bored or burned through the cement, it smelled like burning hair.
Really?
And I remember checking myself, and my partner looked at it. I said, "Do you smell burning hair?" And he goes, "Yeah."
Wow. Oh.
But, and once again, we realized we weren't going to win in that current exchange.
Yeah.
Because we still maintained, there were times when we could hear yelling and screaming, and we'd actually shoot at the corner of the bank building to get the stucco to kind of blow off the side, create like a dust cloud, to let him know we were still there and try to distract him from focusing on people over at the parking lot for the grocery store and stuff like that. So we knew all we could do was try and contain them until SWAT got there.
Again, I'm making notes in my head. Something to think about I'd never thought about is sometimes maybe all you can do is disable the weapon if you can't disable the guy.
Like I said, once again, with all the movement, especially with a compact 9mm at 40 feet, trying to get a headshot when something's bobbing and weaving and whatever. I didn't know where that round was going to end up if it missed.
Yeah.
If I shot up that high.
One of the things that I've read quite a bit is the quote unquote head to toe armor, and that wasn't correct, right? They were clad in black head to toe, but they had chest armor and some other armor apparently.
Yeah, some of it I believe they even made. They took some ballistic material and made like these Velcroed wraps that went around their feet and ankles.
Mm-hmm.
And then they had some like around their thigh area to cover critical artery areas.
Yeah.
And so they were hit there, they wouldn't bleed out because, which was the other, they did have some chemicals on board too.
Yeah.
Which was try to keep their heart rate slow. And because I had at least one round that hit Phillips from behind on the left side of his neck. And what it did was it actually went through a portion of the collar of his jacket, which did have some ballistic material that had been rolled up in there, but it wasn't, when you hear head to toe body armor, it's kind of a few jumps ahead of what they actually had.
Yeah.
But it was way more than the typical, level 3 belts.
Yeah. Wow. Well, it's interesting to point out, I'm looking here, Phillips ended up being shot 11 times and he took his own life there at the end when he realized he wasn't getting out of there. And Matt Serrano was shot 29 times and finally bled out on the scene. So, we now recognize that in training that, you shoot somebody in the chest twice, there's times they don't go down. And we also learned that in the Miami shootout.
Yeah. That's correct. And the thing is Matt Serrano, it wasn't like he laid there and bled out. It happened fairly quickly.
Yeah.
Because he had additional injuries from when they first started moving down Archwood. We went and jumped in my car and we were heading north up to the intersection. And I heard somebody say they bailed out of the car. And I saw the white car bounce off the curb behind a big open belly dump that had like old logs and trees,
mm-hmm.
kind of debris in the back. And so when we got out of the car, my partner was now driving. He was focusing towards Phillips, and I was focusing towards Matt Serrano. And the trunk of the car was open, and he had a folding stock AR platform rifle.
Mm-hmm.
And and this is where training kicked in again, because on the range, the shotgun range, especially for the some of the smaller officers, they would always say, "Okay, don't forget you're shooting factory, load double-aught buck, break your knee, your forward knee, so that you got your weight kind of behind the round,
right?
Because it was going to kick more."
Right.
And I remember telling myself that, break the knee.
Wow.
And so he starts firing his rifle, and I can hear the rounds because I was out. That was one of the times where I was like, because there was nothing between me and him.
Wow.
And I could hear the rounds and the gun and everything. So I just figured, well, I'm going to, by this time, if I can back up, when we first came out of the backyard, there was a guy in the front yard, and I think it was like his first week on patrol, and he was standing there, he had his helmet on, he had a 12 gauge Ithaca shotgun, and I said, "Hey, if you're not going to use that, I'll take it. I'm about out of ammo again." So he hands it to me, and I go, "Where's the butt cup? With extra 5 rounds." And he turned him around to his patrol car, came back with a bandolero that had like 24 rounds on it. I said, "Oh, that's cool."
Excellent.
And then we got in our car, and I didn't know till later he jumped to the back seat.
Oh.
the young patrol guy. And I was like, how'd you get down here? I was riding in the back seat of your car.
Wow. Well, it is amazing for folks that haven't been in these kind of situations. Not only, you're explaining what happened, but in the meantime, radios are going off. I'm sure there was reports of 37 other shooters in every other location, and, people down, and the amount of confusion that happens is truly indescribable.
Yeah, you have to know when to stop listening to the radio. And you pick out because there was one officer that came on during all this who was probably 5-6 miles away, screaming that she just pulled up on an accident with injuries. We're like, say what? Get off the freaking radio.
Yeah, we got problems here, folks.
Yeah, we're dealing with this, then you can do your accident.
Yeah.
But so when I got out of the car at the intersection, I had the 12-gauge shotgun. So I figured, I'm just going to fire this thing as fast as I can. And so I started pumping double-aught buck into the car, and he got hit, I believe, along part of the left side of his face, the left forearm. The third round kind of went into the back seat, and he takes off. So the fourth round, I remembered some of the old shotgun training I'd had years ago, where some of the older bias ply tires, you can bounce the pellets off the pavement.
Right.
To kind of sharpen up the edges and take out a tire. So what the heck? So I pointed and I bounced the pellets, but when you're watching the video, that's when suddenly the gasoline comes out of the tank of the white car, because it ended up hitting me. It bounced up into the gas tank.
Ah.
So then there were several people there. We knew Phillips was coming down around that truck, but this guy, we knew of no other units to the east. So we said, hey, we got to get this guy contained before he gets out of here, because we at least had somewhat of a perimeter. And so we started chasing him. And at one point, he tried to carjack a woman of her minivan.
Right.
But she drove away. Second thing that happened was he briefly kind of rolled to his left, so he was partially in and out of the vehicle. He started firing back at us again. And so my partner made a quick left turn, which I got on him later for. I said, oh, thanks. You put me on the receiving side.
Yeah.
He says, well, did you think I was going to turn right? And
thanks, buddy.
the car was still there, so we got out. We were going to deploy and try to get up to the car. And so he started moving again. We got back in, and as we started to move, a detective car from another division pulls up like, hey, where is he? What's going on? We're going, get out of the way.
Wow.
And so that gave him a jump on us. And as we were coming down, we saw him pull up next to the Jeep pickup truck. And so we grabbed the curb to the left, and there was a couple other guys that showed up behind us, and we were kind of moving our way forward. And so my partner and I said, hey, he's going to go back and get a buddy. We'll just take him out when he's coming back this direction.
Mm-hmm.
About that time, SWAT team screaming out in a, we used to call them orcas, like orca whale.
Yeah.
But they were black and white slip top patrol cars. They didn't have a light bar. They had the takedown lights.
Yeah.
And but no regular light bar, but they were painted black and white. So they come screaming in, and I'm going, who the heck is this? And all of a sudden I look down, and I see the guy wearing running shorts and a T-shirt and helmet. I get my purse. There's some guy wearing his beach shorts down here shooting at the white car.
Yeah, I remember seeing that video.
Yeah, that was Steve. So we start, and that's when they first pulled up, and there was gunfire from Mazzarino's rifle. And what was funny was later, not one of those rounds penetrated the windshield.
Really?
It hit it at it hit the angle of attack just right in that little window. And you add into it the velocity of the rounds.
Yeah.
It was hitting the rounds and going skyborne.
Wow.
So they pretty much, we started seeing them firing under the car. He came running up, and by that time he gave up. And I just remember Steve put his rifle up on the roof or the hood of I believe it was a white car, and it started to slide off. So I grabbed it, put it on a police vehicle that pulled up. And so I was helping one of the other SWAT guys handcuff Serrano, and they pulled off the knit ski cap. And I remember him just looking at it. He says, just go ahead and shoot me right now.
Huh.
And one of the guys says, nah, we've already got an ambulance coming for you.
Yeah. And that would be too easy after all that.
Yeah. And yeah, because I was one of the guys who got sued where they claimed that he laid in the street for 30 some odd minutes.
Yeah.
Which he was laying there, but he wasn't alive.
Yeah.
And because what happened was the first RA rescue unit pulled up, and they started to get out. They checked him, and basically, yeah, he's deceased. They said, well, don't even worry. The civilian he shot's around the corner, the driver of the Jeep pickup truck. So they left, but they didn't fill out what we call it an RA slip. And it's basically a form that shows who the unit was and at what time they pronounced them as being deceased. So later on, some 30, 40 minutes later, when things started to calm down, another ambulance came into the area, and they said, hey, when the other guys were here, we didn't get an RA slip. And they said, oh, okay. So they did the RA slip, but they did it for the time that they were there.
Sure.
Not the time that the first check was done.
Yeah.
So that's what first started this thing of look at this time that he went down and look at the time he was pronounced dead.
Yep. You know, I am amazed that a lawyer would pursue that given all that happened. I mean, I kind of get the family. The families always think, you know, their loved one, you know, is still a nice person, but for a lawyer to take that, I can only hope, you know, it would have been nice if they'd changed venue to here in the Midwest, because not only would they have thrown it out, they probably would have sentenced the lawyer to hard time. But I guess things are different in California.
Well, the attorney, I won't say his name, was well known as, you know, being a proactive suer of the police department.
Ah, okay.
And, he wasn't like some real top attorney that decided to take this on. He's well known.
Ah.
And he sued in federal court. And what a lot of people don't realize when you sue in federal court is no matter what damages are awarded, if the finding is for the plaintiff, the attorney fees and anything associated with the case that they present is paid for by the taxpayers.
Yeah.
So they'll go in and they'll say, just send LAPD a message that they need to find another way to do something. And just my clients are only asking for $1 because that's all they got to do is win $1.
Mm-hmm.
So the jury says, yep, we agree with the plaintiff. Here's your $1. Now, technically, the attorneys are not supposed to share any of the money they made off of the case preparation and so on and so forth. But I know you might find this hard to believe. There are some attorneys who figure out a way to kind of funnel some money back to their plaintiffs. And, you know, but yeah, it was kind of a slap in the face, especially when it came back a hung jury. And so he thought about refiling, but I after talking with the jurors, he figured out that getting the hung jury was, I mean, he probably had the only couple of people that would vote basically no.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that all went away, and we never heard about that anymore.
Well, in the time we've got left, I got to ask the question that I'm sure you've been asked countless times, but in the 25 years since this incredible moment in your life happened, what are your takeaways, whether they be shooting, tactical, or just personally?
As far as shooting and tactical, all the mechanics are in place. It just to what degree of success you have with those depends on your own mindset. And this goes for people who are CCW.
Right.
You have to have a mindset of what will happen when or if you have to pull the trigger, and the after effects, and be able to stand firm and protect yourself. And but the other thing that got me too is I found myself for a couple of weeks afterwards, like driving around town at home, and all of a sudden I looked down, I was doing 20 miles an hour because my head was spinning so fast on what had happened.
Sure.
And I started looking at all the videos of, like, you know, I didn't know that belly dump was full of tree logs. And I didn't know that these people were over here and those people had moved from over there. And all of a sudden I said, you know what? I'm debriefing this thing in my brain with information I didn't have at the time. And so for officers and, you know, civilians alike, when you're involved in something like this, you got to remember you can't base your decisions on knowledge you didn't have at the time the incident went down.
Yep.
Because if you do, you will drive yourself crazy.
Excellent point.
You know, it's woulda, shoulda, coulda, you know. And, but yeah, we were very fortunate that day. And, you know, it could have been a lot worse.
I was going to say there's an opinion I've got after reading again about this. I got to say these guys were pretty lousy shots. They were using the spray and pray method, because if these guys, well, this is my opinion, so set me straight if I'm incorrect, but it seems like as many rounds as they put down, if they had really done a good job of targeting the police and civilians, the body count would have been awful.
Yes, especially if they had zero tactics. I mean, if they had used one to do cover fire while the other one zeroed in. But yeah, it was all, like you said, some pray. Yeah. You know, they had more than enough ammo. And if they threw enough of it down range, it would either keep somebody in place, cause them to flee, or might hit them. Yeah. And yeah, it was just, and which is another thing too about the training and being aware of your background. Like we were trying to figure out how can we locate these guys? Are they by our corner or the other corner, without poking our heads up? And we got to notice there was a slight difference in the noise of their gunfire if they were on one side of the corner of the bank versus the other. And so we could almost tell where they were at based on those sounds. But yeah, for the longest time, every time I heard a jackhammer, I'd be like, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. Well, Vince, thank you very much for the talk. It was an incredible, again, a watershed moment for law enforcement, and I'm glad that you're playing cowboy now on your ranch. So thank you very much for talking to us.
Hey, thank you. And everybody out there, have a safe day.
Well, that was a great episode, and I'm going to have Vince come back because we only scratched the surface of what happened and what was learned on that crazy day in 1997. And with that, I hope you're enjoying the Guns Magazine podcast. Guns Magazine was first on the newsstand, and today we're bringing you the most interesting chats in the gun world. If you've got any questions or comments about the show, please email me. That would be editor@gunsmagazine.com. Make sure you subscribe to us on your favorite podcast directory, YouTube, and of course, at gunsmagazine.com. And while you're online, don't forget to check out our great sister publications, American Handgunner Magazine at AmericanHandgunner.com, AmericanCop.com, and our numerous special editions available on our websites. Most of all, while you're online, I'd also appreciate it if you'd share a favorite episode or some kind words on your own social media. Well, that's it for this episode of the Guns Magazine podcast. For the entire staff at FMG Publications, I'm Guns Magazine editor Brent Wheat. Now get out there and get shooting.